So if you've been looking around for a test bench at all, check out this PRAXIS WETBENCH by PRIMOCHILL. I just want to go through a quick build of this. I'll just show you kind of the overall process and give you some of my thoughts and opinions along the way. Overall, the build is quite simple to do. It's very well packed. I would say set aside 2 to 3 hours to get this built. Probably doesn't take that long, but by the time you install all your components, you'll need a few hours of time. So the very first thing you want to do is go ahead and just unbox everything and get everything set aside. Now the first step is to assemble the two angled legs, and you just want to unwrap those and just get them on your bench. Now you do need to remove the protective covering on both of the acrylic pieces, and you need to remove it from both sides. Overall, it's not difficult at all. Just take your time doing it. It comes off pretty easy. I would say it took me just a couple of minutes for each side. Once you get that removed, you're just going to set it into the leg. Now I will say that it's really it's kind of dummy proof. There's really only one way to do it, and it almost kind of even locks into place. There's really no way to screw that up. And once you get that set in place, it's just a single screw, and then there's a washer and a bolt or a washer and a nut that goes on the other side. So very easy to do. And then once you get that done, obviously you're going to assemble the other leg just in the same manner. Once you get both of those built, you're going to take what they call the mid tray. Now this is probably the trickiest part of a whole assembly, and it tells you have to angle this mid tray into the leg. And what it just means is this little lip here has to kind of fit over the edge of the leg here. So you kind of got to angle it and then just straighten it up. Takes just a second and you'll get the main idea. And then there's 4 screws that hold in each leg. And everything was lined up perfectly, didn't have to mess around with it. It assembled quite nicely. All right, so once you get the legs together, the next step is to go ahead and get your power supply brackets installed. There's just 2 of them here. Really assembles just like any other case does. You're just going to put this bracket up there, install your 4 screws, and then across the top there's 2 screw holes. There's 2 bolt holes. You're just going to align those up into the slots into this mid tray. And then there's some nylon screws that hold it in there. So it's relatively easy to do. The back part of the power supply case is really more just of a brace. It's just got a little lip on the bottom that holds it in. Easy to do. Once you're done here, you can either install your cables now or you can come back and do that later. The next step is to install the 5.25-inch drive sleds. Now, I'm not really going to use those, I don't think, in this particular build, but I'm going to just demonstrate installing them here. They install mainly the same way. There's just 2 screw holes on the top. You just line them up with your slots and you can screw them in, as you can see here. Now at this point you can choose to install your drives. You do get up to 4 SSDs or 4 hard drives. Now you can kind of mix and match a combination of both of those depending on what you want to do. The next step is to install the motherboard tray. Now this is where the other piece of acrylic comes into play, and basically it's just the same process as the legs. You need to remove the protective coating, get your motherboard tray out, and lay that down in there. There's really only one way it goes, and it's pretty intuitive as to when it's in place. Now there's 7 screws and nuts that hold that in. They install just the same way as they do on the legs. Easy to do. The next step, and this is maybe just one of the little strange parts about this bench, is the standoffs. Now the standoff itself is just kind of this screw that comes in from behind, and then you'll install the standoff piece on the other side, on the side that your motherboard is going to mount on. And that kind of screws it together, and then there's a nut that will hold your motherboard on. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Obviously, you're just going to install the standoffs that you need. The particular motherboards that this supports is Mini ITX, Micro ATX, ATX, and eATX. The next step is to just install the GPU bracket here. Now there's just 2 screws to this, and it's easy to do. You don't need to tighten. I wouldn't tighten them down at first, just kind of get it pretty close, because you might need to adjust that just a little bit when you get your GPU ready to install, or whatever other expansion cards you need to do. Now on the top of the legs, you're going to install these 4 bolts, and these are going to be the bolts that the motherboard tray sits on. So you don't want to tighten them down exactly, just kind of leave them loose there. And then, as you can see here, you just slide your motherboard tray over and it locks into place. Now you can either choose to tighten it down or you can leave it loose depending on what you're going to do with it. Now, as you can see here, the next step, you can either do it now or when you're done, but you just lay the motherboard over those standoffs just on these posts here, and it comes with a bunch of these little nuts here. Just screw those on just like anything else. It's pretty self-explanatory. The only problem I've really had is these little nuts are sometimes kind of difficult in a few places to get installed, and in these two locations I couldn't even put them because they're not going to fit down in there. I wish they had a different nut design that would fit down in there, but at this point you can go ahead and install your GPU and then just screw in all of your capture screws at the top there. Now at this point I went ahead and just started getting an idea of where my power supply cables were going to go, and just test fit and everything. I did end up redoing this a little bit, but the next step is the two Vanguard switches that they send with it. And you just want to undo the nut and the rubber grommet on here, and then go ahead and get the cables connected. Now, we'll say the documentation's a little bit inaccurate. They don't look like this on the back. There's only 3 connections on the back of it, and it shows the power connection as being a normally closed power connection. That's not true for most PCs that I've worked with. They're normally open. So the documentation is incorrect for the power switch. Anyways, once you get those ready, you're going to just slide that nut over the cable inside, and then push it up through the hole, and then connect it to the NO terminal and the C terminal for normally open. Once you get that done, slide the switch back down through the hole, and then go ahead and put the nut up over the shank there, and then just go ahead and tighten that up. You will do that for both the power and the reset switches. They're going to be the same. The other thing I will mention is that they didn't label it the reset switch. It's just a power LED. So obviously they're repurposing a cable here. It's not a big deal. The power switch, just put that over your 2 pins in either direction. Polarity doesn't really matter here. And the power LED, if that's what yours says, you just put that on your reset switch terminals and it'll work fine. So the next piece you can do is the radiator mount. Now there's a couple of different ways to install that, but basically it's all put together for you. It mounts the same way as the motherboard tray does. You just install the 4 screws, and then it just slides over the top. Now you can install a radiator internally like I'm showing you here, or you can install it external to this tray. I didn't mess around with installing it externally because I'm actually not going to leave this radiator installed. But what I did notice, I'm just putting an AIO on it here, is I think the hose length of that is 400 millimeters, and it really was not enough to get down to the CPU. I'd have to mess with it. But for regular radiators, and soft hoses, it's things that you can customize. It'll be just fine. But anyways, I've had this PC up and running. Works great. Overall, this was fairly simple to do. I didn't have any real major issues with it, and this will just allow me, I did tidy up the cables on the bottom, but yours is going to look a little bit different. Now it does have the mounting for some of the PRIMOCHILL water reservoirs on the side there if you choose to use those. But overall, I'm quite pleased with it. This will allow me to do some work up on the bench without having to get into a PC case. I was having to mess around with all my cable management all the time. I wanted to try something different. So anyways, it's got kind of a cool look. It comes in a whole bunch of different colors. I'll put some links in the description below. You can check those out. All right, well, that is going to do it for today. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know in the comments below. Always happy to help out the best I can and when I can. And that is going to do it for today. Thanks for watching.